Hi, everybody. I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm films and then we talk about them. I'm obviously not at the archive today. I am elsewhere, and so this is a pre-recorded show. And what we just saw was some 16mm footage of the Protestant churches of Pittsburgh. Somebody went around and documented all of the Protestant churches in Pittsburgh. I don't know what the purpose was. This came from the Oregon Archive. The reason why I'm showing this is because I'm in Pittsburgh, and so I thought, well, I might as well show these. And I'm not going to repeat the tour that was in this film that we just saw. But I definitely will mention it to some people in Pittsburgh, some archivist people that I'm talking to, because it is an odd thing. So we got some films lined up that are about church, and some of these I've shown before, but they're pretty great and short. So this next one is part of a series of films that I showed for kind of how to do different things. And this one is how to be a church usher. And I'm guessing the reason behind that this film was made is for big churches where they had to explain to men who were assigned to be ushers for the congregation. This was a quick and easy way to show and repeat the same information over and over again about how ushers are supposed to do what they do. I think when I was in church, when I was in high school, I was an usher at least once, maybe twice. So I didn't see a film. But here is The Church Usher. Enjoy.
Whenever people gather in churches, there is a need for dignity and quiet that is conducive to worship. But occasionally things happen. Something goes wrong. When this happens, it calls for prompt action from one trained to meet such situations. The church usher. The minister, as prophet, spiritual leader, and preacher, has the most important role in the worship life of the church. He must direct the several activities of the service and create an atmosphere which will help the people achieve a spirit of worship. In most churches, the minister is assisted by ushers. As doorkeepers in the house of the Lord and assistants to the minister, they have an important function to perform too. But without careful planning and preparation, the ushers can fail to be an asset to the minister and the service of worship he is directing. They can even create more disturbance than order. They may even become a disturbing element in the service. Such a simple thing as the way ushers are dressed can create an atmosphere of harmony and order. But if each one is clothed differently, the impression is one of confusion and disharmony. Well, let's go back to the beginning and see how this should be done. Often the usher provides that all-important first impression to the arriving people. His appearance is important. What the ushers wear may be a matter of decision made by the ushers and the minister. In some informal congregations, it may be proper for ushers to be coatless in the summer. In others, the proper mode of dress may be similar colored suits or even formal coats and ties. so long as the apparel fits in with the manner of dress of the congregation and the dress of all the ushers is similar, good taste can be the criterion. Uniformity of dress can also be a means of identification. Another means of identification is the small lapel flower. One of the ushers should be selected as the head usher. He may be selected by the minister, the worship committee, official board, or board of deacons. He holds a position of trust and importance and should be a person of mature judgment with talent for leadership. It is his job to see that there are enough ushers on hand at every service, to assign the ushers their individual stations, to work out the procedures for directing special services, and to instruct the other ushers in their duties. An important part of the usher's duties is seating the persons as they arrive. As persons come, the usher should find out how many are in the party that are to be seated together. He will ask them to follow him down the aisle to a place he has selected. The usher will stop by the pew in front of the one the people are to enter and turn to face them. As the people enter the pew, and not before, the usher should give them a bulletin. He should wait until they are comfortably seated before returning to the narthex for the next group. If the people indicate that they would prefer a seat other than the one the usher has selected, the usher should allow them to sit wherever they like. Always there are those who arrive after the service begins. To avoid disturbing the service, the ushers should suggest that these wait in the narthex for a few moments. The usher may be guided by instructions in the church bulletin indicating when late arrivals may be seated. If possible, seats should be saved at the rear of the church so that latecomers can be seated without disturbing the congregation or embarrassing the late arrivers. It is helpful if the usher can give them a hymnal open to the proper place so that they can join in the service immediately. As the service continues, those ushers stationed near the rear should remain at their stations. They should look after the physical comfort and well-being of the congregation as inconspicuously as possible. If a person becomes ill during the service, the quick and quiet action of an usher is needed to avoid disturbing the congregation or embarrassing the sick person. An usher should stay with the sick person until it can be determined what should be done. In some cases, it may be necessary to telephone for a doctor or an ambulance. In some churches, an agreement is reached with a physician in the congregation that he may be called out of the sanctuary if needed. The actions of the ushers can emphasize that the offering is a solemn act of worship. The ushers should not do anything that will call attention to themselves. The keynote here is dignity and poise. Normally, each usher will receive one plate and will proceed to an assigned aisle and begin passing the plate along the row of worshipers. His partner at the other end of the pew will pass his plate down the next row. Each usher will remain at the end of the pew where his plate is being passed until it reaches the opposite end. He will then move to the next row to receive the plate that has arrived there. He will then skip one row and start passing the plate he has received down the next pew. If the pew is not filled with people, so that the plate can be passed easily along the pew, the usher may simply offer the plate to those near the end of his aisle and go on to the next pew. Where Holy Communion is received at the front altar, the head usher must work out some plan for moving the people easily to the front and then back to the seats. He will need to know how many persons the altar can accommodate at a time. He will want to designate certain aisles for persons to come forward and others for their return to their seats. He will want to assign ushers at strategic points to direct persons in these paths. Other ushers will stand at the ends of the pews. They will indicate to the persons in the pews when they are to come forward. When as many persons as can be accommodated have been invited, the usher will stand at the end of the empty pew to indicate to the others that they are to wait. In churches where communion is received in the pews, the church elders or deacons may serve communion, or the ushers may be designated to do it. It will be handled similarly to passing plates for the offering. As the service ends, the ushers assist the pastor in representing the welcome spirit of the church. They are particularly attentive to visitors, giving them a cordial invitation to come again, or perhaps asking them to fill out a visitor's card for the pastor's information. They are alert for those who need special help. All in all, it is a wonderful opportunity to be a vital part of the worship of the church community, a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord, the church usher.
It was just barely animated, just barely. Anyways, this next film is interesting because this is also part of a series, and it is Your Life's Work. And so we've seen different films from this series about different types of things like restaurant work or insurance work or accounting or bookkeeping or a variety of different things. And these are church vocations. So this is to all the different vocations associated with churches, not only just the clergy, but also then all the administration staff and all that stuff. And so these films were shown to people that were in vocational school, in high school, and in college, trade school, it's trying to get people to realize what it takes to be in these different positions. So here is Church Vocations. Enjoy.
Your life work. I like a spire against the sky. I do not know exactly why, if you should ask that I should tell. It just fits there on top so well, and lifts you up, if you will let it, each Sunday, if you'll not forget it, to that which shifts your soul in high. I like a spire against the sky. In every city, town, and village, there stands the church, ready to serve the community. How well it serves depends upon the minister and the program he develops for the members of his parish. To provide this leadership, the minister and his aides must have specialized training. The work of the minister may be divided into several parts. The preparation and delivery of sermons. When a minister leads in Christian worship, devoutly and skillfully, he brings that ancient word, "Be still and know that I am God." The educational and recreational program. As teacher of Christianity, the minister can make the difference between sound and unsound character for hundreds. The counseling of parishioners. Ministers have no greater privilege than helping people with personal problems. Evangelism. In cities or in the tropics or in the hinterlands of America, it isn't the buildings that bear the Christian message. It's men of power and vision. The special services, such as marriages, baptisms, and funerals. The minister leads a constant procession of people into Christian experience. Finally, the management of the church's business. As the religious leader of his church, the minister must be able to deliver his sermons in a clear, fluent, and distinctive manner. His thinking must be logical and broad in order to inspire, enrich, and enlighten his congregation. As an educational and recreational leader in his church, the minister has need of the highest qualities of leadership. He must first be alert to the needs of his parish. Then he must be able to plan effective programs to meet them and be able to enlist the cooperation of his lay groups in carrying out these programs. This includes the selection and training of the best leaders among the men and women, the boys and girls of his congregation. As a counselor, the minister must be ever available to his church people. He calls upon the sick and troubled and welcomes the stranger. He is attentive to the personal needs of his people. The minister must be ready and willing at all times, with dignity and sincerity, to perform the solemn and sacred rites of marriage, baptism, and burial. Both in happiness and sorrow, everyone feels the need of God and asks the service of the one who ministers in his name. And finally, as a businessman, the minister must understand and direct intelligently the handling of church funds. He may have help from a board or special committee, but the responsibility for getting things done usually rests with the minister. This is true of routine matters, such as supervising the maintenance of building and grounds, as well as of special projects, such as building a new church or adding to the present one. In many denominations, there are higher administrative posts to which young ministers may aspire. Such church officials provide advice and guidance for local ministers and religious leaders. The minister's service does not end with the activities which he conducts personally. Church schools, for example, are usually conducted by volunteers from the church membership, but it is the minister's job to select these people who will help him guide the religious development of young and old. Such work requires initiative and originality to handle satisfactorily the many problems involved. Since music is recognized as an inseparable part of all religion, the choir is an important group within the church organization. There are several schools now in operation which offer special courses in choir music. A very important part of all church work is the youth program, both religious and recreational. It is designed to prepare young men and women for leadership as adults in the activities of the church and community. As such, it must contribute to their well-rounded development. The adult work in the church includes study groups for men as well as women to acquaint the members with the work of the church, both at home and abroad. Men and women, and sometimes the whole family, participate in social meetings of the church, which are designed to promote fellowship and understanding. Some of the larger churches engage in social service through well-organized welfare programs. These are usually located in the poorer sections of the cities and include religious, educational, recreational, and health activities. The minister must work closely with the director of these activities, who are specially trained for their jobs and usually are assisted by a staff of volunteer workers. Even the small churches have needy people and must engage in similar activities. The home missionary field reaches out to the underprivileged all over the nation, regardless of race or color. Workers in this field are mostly trained laymen who are able to render all types of religious and educational services. Foreign missionaries often obtain workers from among the natives, giving them whatever training is needed for their special assignments. The churches often send laymen with specialized training in teaching, medicine, and agriculture to organize special programs in the foreign field. Another field of religious work is the summer camp, with a program for junior high and high school people, as well as a week for the family. A camp promotes the religious and social development for all the family. In a small church, the minister usually must perform all his official duties himself. In larger churches, where the program is large and varied, the minister may have one or more assistants who are assigned to direct certain activities and to help with routine office work and counseling. The ministry, as all other professions, requires intelligence and good health. But more than this, it requires a man with devout and sincere temperament, whose life is an expression of his religion. He must be happy in helping others, for that will be his greatest reward. He must like people and possess leadership qualities. In preparing for the ministry, one should secure a broad college education before entering into professional training. Courses in recognized theological schools usually run 3 to 4 years in length. Each religious faith, of course, determines its own plan of training. It is certainly true that a career in the ministry presents an abundance of opportunities for worthwhile service. Whether large or small, the church is the hub around which all religious activities revolve. The early history of our North American continent is studded with the names of church leaders who opened the frontiers and made way for civilization. Many of our largest and finest educational institutions owe their existence to ministers. Among others, Reverend John Harvard gave his library to found Harvard University. George Whitefield, an early minister, is given credit for founding the University of Pennsylvania. Ministers down through the ages have contributed richly to the field of literature. Rabbi Joshua Liebman's Peace of Mind has brought help to innumerable people, and Reverend Lloyd Douglas novels have been read by millions. Ministers are prominent in public affairs of all kinds. The minister is called upon for the invocation. Practically all public functions, including the inauguration of our highest executives, are marked by a dedicatory prayer by a representative of a church. But probably a minister is most effective when, at communion before a high altar, or before a simple altar with only the simplest elements in his hands, he is able to introduce his people to their closest experience with the living God. The satisfaction is no less when such moments occur with one small boy during a quiet walk on a country road. The spire that stands against the sky would only have light in the windows beneath it, as a continuing stream of candidates shall choose to serve the church. This may be your life work.
Yeah, pretty great. I like these films because they definitely show us a certain time and different certain place, and some of these positions no longer exist, but or they've been expanded, or you don't make money doing these things. This is just something you do. You volunteer. So, all right, the next film we're gonna watch is because we showed the last 2 films, and you've seen this before in the past potentially, but this next film I have not shown, and this one is, I got this on eBay with a bunch. It was 2 or 3 of these films, and it must have been someone who sold organs, because this one is specifically for churches and specifically to sell an organ to a church. And so this one's called Music for Our Church, and it's pretty great. It's got this sales pitch. It's pretty brilliant in that regard. So here, enjoy Music for Our Church.
music certainly is part of the soul of the church. I can feel it now, and you can see it on the faces here. The time we spent searching and investigating was worthwhile. I thought I had a big responsibility when the pastor asked me to head the committee to buy this organ. After all, I'm a businessman, not a musician. But I was certainly lucky with the committee I got. Our church organist, Alice Berry, was on the committee, and the third member was Fred Thompson. He's a real leader in our church, Sunday school superintendent and choir director, and head of all our youth activities. We got right down to business the first night we met at my house. So, of course, I'm delighted to have your help. It's an important decision we have to make. We all know the church needs a new organ, but the question is, what kind and what make should we recommend? I'm sure we all have some specific requirements in mind. So let's talk about them. What are your ideas, Miss Berry?
Well, my first consideration, of course, is how the organ will sound in our church. That means we want an organ that will be acceptable in every way for use in church.
How do you mean that, Mrs. Berry?
Well, church music should inspire a congregation. It should be rich, full of meaning. It should be capable of interpreting the meaning of our hymns. It should be a church organ.
I see.
So do I, Jim. But I think Mrs. Berry will agree that a church organ must be useful in other ways, too.
What do you mean by that, Fred?
Well, just this. In addition to the music for the regular church services, I'd like to see us get an organ that the young people will use, too, in their activities.
Sunday school?
Yes, Sunday school, all the young people's programs, which are very important.
You've got a very good point there, Fred. Now, let me tell you some of the things I'm thinking about. First, I look at this as an investment. Just as in business, I want to be certain that we get the very best value and the very best quality. And I want to be sure that we won't be burdened with heavy maintenance and service costs, month after month, for years to come.
Well, that's right, Jim. Those are important points.
Yes, they are, Fred. And I want to be 100% certain that I'm dealing with a manufacturer with a fine reputation, one whose experience is outstanding. Those are the points I'm going to check into.
You know more about those things than I do. What I really want is an organ that's right for church, our church.
I'm looking for versatility, an organ that many people, old and young, can enjoy.
And I'll play the hard-hearted businessman to be sure that the organ you both want will be the best possible investment for the church. After that meeting, all three of us worked independently, each of us trying to find the one organ that would satisfy our particular requirements best. When we had made up our minds independently, we met again at my house to report and make our separate recommendations. Well, Ms. Berry, let's hear your report first. What organ do you recommend?
Goodness, me first? All right. I'm convinced that I found an organ that will meet all my wishes for an instrument that will sound right, be right for the music in our church. I recommend that we buy a Hammond organ.
Well, that's great, Mrs. Berry, because Hammond is my choice, too.
How about you, Mr.
Yes,
Graham?
how about you?
Well, now this is interesting, because the Hammond organ gets my recommendation, too. There's no disagreement.
Good.
But now, let's not get carried away. I think we owe it to the congregation to check the reasons behind our unanimous decision. You first, Mrs. Berry.
Well, my recommendation is based on my experience as a musician. I thought my first step would be to find what other churches are using and how satisfied they are.
And you found?
That over 35,000 churches of all sizes and denominations have installed Hammond organs.
35,000? That is important. What else?
Well, I called on the best organists in town, and for quite a few miles around. And, well, I got my most valuable information from Alan Temple.
You mean the organist at the Parkside Church?
Yes. I plucked up my nerve and went to see him.
Well, he's certainly the best organist in this part of the country. What did he tell you?
He was most helpful.
Of course, I'll be glad to tell you why we chose a Hammond for this church.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. I hate to take up your time, but our committee has a big responsibility to the congregation.
Yes, I know. And as organists, we have an important responsibility to the tradition of church music, too. Our music must convey the same universal message of love and hope and redemption that the words of our hymns and prayers do. That's why this organ is so rewarding.
Of course, I know your reputation as an organist, Mr. Temple.
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. But of course, you know I'm only one musician. Many world-famous organists, composers, and conductors play and praise the Hammond. Fine symphony orchestras use it. And of course, anyone with an ear for a beautiful, rich tone appreciates the Hammond, too.
There's just one question, though.
Oh, what's that?
Well, do you think I'll be able to...
Able to handle the Hammond? Step around here and I'll show you. Now, as you know, church music calls for traditional organ tones. Here I have 18 preset keys. Each one of them gives me one of those traditional tones. Listen. That's a familiar tone, isn't it? Here's another. Here's another.
It seems quite simple.
It's simplicity itself. Listen again. A full organ tone. Now, those are only 4 of the familiar traditional tones your congregation will want. Altogether, you have 18 tones available simply by pressing one of these presets. Actually, they'll give you all the basic organ tones you'll need for most of your liturgical music. But to an organist, the most valuable feature of a Hammond organ is its unique system of drawbar registration. With just these few drawbars, it's possible to create quickly and easily thousands of beautiful, full, rich organ tones of your own choosing.
Really? How?
Simply by applying the fundamental principles of all music. As you know, tones are made up of harmonics, just as words are made up of letters. On a typewriter, we can make any word we want simply by combining the various letters of the alphabet. On the Hammond organ, we have 9 harmonic drawbars that constitute a musical alphabet. By arranging the drawbars in different positions, we actually spell tones with harmonics like you spell words with letters. We could very easily call this system a tone typewriter.
Is it hard to learn?
Not at all. Look, you know there are only 4 basic families of organ tones. Flutes, reeds, strings, and diapasons, or foundation tones. Let's set the drawbars for a nice flute tone. There. And here's what it sounds like.
That's very much like the tone on these preset keys.
Right. That's a fundamental flute tone. But the remarkable part of the drawbar system is that I can get hundreds of variations of those 4 basic tones just by arranging the drawbars. Let's make our flute tone a little brighter by adding this drawbar. There.
Oh, I like that better.
How about this? Here's another flute tone.
That's beautiful. How many of those tones can you get? Different flute tones, I mean.
I've no idea. Thousands.
You see, even the smallest adjustment of the drawbars changes the tone slightly. So I don't suppose I've ever used all the tones it's possible to get from this flexible system of drawbar registration.
It's amazing. With that system, I wouldn't be restricted to any one tone. I could adjust it to the music.
That's right.
But what about the other three basic families? Strings, for instance.
Here's a lovely string tone. And here's a reed tone with our flute accompanying. And finally, here's the most familiar of organ tones, a diapason.
It's amazing. Such wonderful tones. And so many. But how can I remember those settings?
Very simply. You see, each of the four has its own characteristic shape on the drawbars. Well, here, maybe this will illustrate it for you. You see, there's the basic setting for a flute tone. That's the way our drawbars were set here. And there's the basic shape. And here's the basic setting for the string tones. All you have to remember is this slow curve. And here's the reed setting. Any variation of the reed tone you want will be in that same V shape. And here's the diapason, like a big check mark from left to right. And that's all there's to it.
Why, it's as simple as can be. I'm sure I can handle it.
Of course you can. And you'll find much satisfaction, too, in the fact that this is a complete organ. In fact, every model in the Hammond line is complete with 2 manual keyboards and a pedal keyboard. Listen. This organ has a 32-note pedal keyboard designed to meet AGO specifications, and an additional solo pedal unit that will give you tones from a 1 foot all the way down to a 32-foot pitch. Now listen to this.
That's beautiful. Of course, your church is so much larger than ours. Would a Hammond sound so grand in ours?
It certainly would. You know, I played a Hammond in our small church before this one was built. A Hammond organ is the only organ that can provide just exactly the right amount of reverberation, regardless of the acoustics or size of your church. That's because it doesn't depend on the natural reverberation of the room. The reverberation unit provided with the tone cabinet will give you cathedral-like tones in even the smallest church. Now, here's an exclusive feature of the Hammond organ. It's called touch response percussion control and produces percussive effects. For instance, here's a bell tone carrying the melody.
My, how beautiful.
And here's a duet with a chime-like tone.
had no idea you could get those tones without special attachments.
Well, this unique feature isn't found on any other organ. And that's another reason why I favor a Hammond. You can produce hundreds of interesting percussion tones ranging all the way from chimes to harps. Here's another.
Mr. Temple, it's simply thrilling.
It's a beautiful instrument. This concert model is the largest in the Hammond line. Now, I don't know what your church's budget is, but whatever it is, you'll find a Hammond organ that will give you the same registration flexibility and rich tonal quality that you hear now. Come, let me show you something. Now, here in the choir practice room, we have the spinet model of the Hammond organ. It has the same drawbar system as the larger organs. The new model spinet also has the percussion control I showed you. This model is perfect for this place. Why, for years we used it as the main instrument in our original church. And even now we move it over to the chapel for weddings and special services. Listen to it.
I was just entranced at the beautiful music coming out of the little spinet. And now, of course, I can't wait to... That is, of course, if you're satisfied.
What about you, Fred? Miss Berry seems to have run into a very convincing gentleman.
Well, I had about the same experience. Only there must have been 1,000 people convincing me. You know that big community church in North Hills?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard about the very active weekday program they have. Well, that church is really the center of community life. What I saw made my head swim. They have a big Hammond organ in the church, but they also have a spinet that is the busiest organ you can possibly imagine. 2 kids can lift it, and they wheel it back and forth all week from room to room. Wherever they need music, that's where the Hammond organ is. In the Sunday school room, it seemed to make those children sing with all their hearts, and from Sunday morning on, all through the week. That Hammond spinet model followed the activities all through the church calendar. The adult Sunday school, the Boy Scouts, the Glee Club, the Teenage Club, prayer meeting, and choir practice. I was amazed. Why, they carted that spinet from place to place like it was no more trouble than a piccolo.
Well, isn't that hard on an organ?
Not on a Hammond, it isn't. The activities director there told me he had thrown away the key to the organ. So many people, young and old, are able to play it, and do.
Well, doesn't it get out of tune?
No, I asked the same question. It's the only instrument in the world that can't get out of tune. Well, that's one of the features that made the Hammond organ famous.
That's right. Mr. Temple told me the same thing.
By golly, that's why the people I called told me there had never been a penny of tuning expense and almost no maintenance cost with their Hammond organs. You know, I practically dialed my finger off calling every church in the city to get answers to my questions. Now, may I interrupt you 2 enthusiasts long enough to tell you why I recommend the Hammond?
Of course.
Surely.
Well, they provided straightforward answers to many of my questions, and you confirmed everything I've read. Then it was a simple matter to check Hammond's standing and reputation. It's the best. I learned that there was an organ priced to meet our budget. And, of course, I've already told you that I'm satisfied we'll have no tuning costs and little maintenance to worry us in the future. I've checked everything from a business standpoint, and I'm convinced that a Hammond organ will be our best investment. Yes, Mrs. Berry and Fred, I'm in complete accord with you. I feel confident that we've reached a sound decision.
Oh, Mr. Graham, our congregation has such a wonderful surprise in store. Why,
Everybody will enjoy it.
Yes, music for our church. Good music, inspiring music. I am proud that I had something to do with bringing this organ into our church. And I know Fred Thompson feels the same way. And well, as for Mrs. Berry, her music this morning is speaking for her.
Yeah, they lay in pretty heavy on the sales pitch towards the end. Anyways, thanks for joining us today. If you like what you saw, please donate to AV Geeks. You can do that by buying us coffee at ko-fi.com. You can also go to patreon.com/avgeeks. And you can also just hit the like button or the subscribe button. We'll have a show tomorrow. And I think if I see some people at this conference that I'm at in Pittsburgh that have seen the show, I might have them make a brief appearance to say hi. So you'll say like, oh, that person in the comments, that's what they look like. But maybe not. We'll see. Anyways, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon. Take care.